Hello, Tyler Bryden here. Hope everything's going well. It's an interesting time of the year. If you're a tech founder, you're a startup, YC is opening their Winter 2023 batch, and that means that there are a lot of people currently finishing up, submitting, maybe have already submitted applications for this funding cycle. So it takes place January to March 2023, and will be remote with optional in-person components. So we're moving back to a hybrid model for YC. Sounds like still slightly optional, but really, a shift after many, seems like many years of lots of these accelerated programs having to go fully remote because of the pandemic. So first of all, that's one thing to consider, that I think some of the advantages that come through these programs actually are very transparent when there are in-person gatherings. That's where a lot of value creation, relationships are created, where you can sense one another more. And a lot of, obviously, the early versions of YC, which some people still consider more of the golden years now that the volume and stuff has been considered, the focus was on in-person get-togethers and has created an incredible network that has spawned, incredible companies from YC, as well as companies that came out of it, talented people who maybe that company didn't work, but then they went on to do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. So overall, that's an exciting piece of this. September 12th is the deadline. So it's coming up hot, 8 p.m. Pacific time. Always, for us, it was Eastern Standard Time. So give you a little bit more life. It felt like, anyways. And then a couple other notes just quickly here, and these have been pretty general through YC's sort of batches as a whole. For you to be considered a founder, you need to have 10% equity. So if anyone has more than 10% equity on your, on your cap table, now outside of investors who have invested previously, then that means that they would be considered a founder. And this is the part that sort of is the requisite for you to attend events and everything there. So Y Combinator has moved much more to a rolling basis. So you will know by November 18th if you apply by the deadline. And then they've sort of extended this application period where you can apply late. Probably maybe not recommended, but if you have the metrics, if you have the growth, if you have the product, and maybe some of those things became transparent after the deadline, that it seems that you're at the right stage, then go ahead. I think they have empathy for founders, empathy for the fact that we have so much going on in our lives. And if you miss a deadline by a little bit, I don't think that's going to be the deal breaker, especially if you're doing a lot of other things right. So there are a couple things that are sort of interesting to me that I stick out. So interviews, and I guess I'll just talk for a second here. I have applied for Y Combinator several times in the past. Sometimes we have gotten, good interest. Sometimes we have gotten little interest. Still not exactly sure, what delineates those two from my own experience. One thing I will say is that as you go, longer on, and then they start to gather data from applications about sort of your growth rate and users and all this stuff, then they can start to sort of build this, I think, profile of, what are you prioritizing as a company? What is your growth trajectory? And with that becomes a lot of sort of insights and sort of pattern recognition from all the experience they've had in just so many companies applying over the years. And, I remember specifically one batch, and I should know this exact one, but I don't. We were invited to then interview. I jumped on a call. Michael Siebel was right there. And that was a super interesting experience. We felt that we had prepared really great. We had done a bunch of mock interviews with Y Combinator alumni who said we were doing a good job in that. We had one who I would say gave us the exact opposite, but most of them overall had a consensus that you're pretty solid, better than I was when I was accepted into Y Combinator, which was good feedback. We had this very divisive plan as we got into that interview where basically quick intro, hit hard with a sort of tagline. And then what we wanted to do was then dive into a demo of the platform because, generally the understanding is that they like to see that you're already building something, that something's already built, that there's something that customers can use. It shows that you're willing to work and you're making this investment and you're, making progress. And there was this moment where we said, hey, we'd love to show you a demo. And Michael then sort of said, before we do that, I want to ask X. And I think that's where the moment that I would just recommend is you might have this very rigid, sort of strict pattern of where you might think this is going to go, and then that can be deviated very quickly. And I think my idea is this idea of like a pattern interrupt that I think that they're purposely sort of putting on founders to make them deviate from the course that they hope, because as soon as you start sort of after your intro is done, you start to lose a little bit of control as they start to ask questions. And there are some, maybe I'll link it as a resource here. If you get to that stage with the application, there are some really good ones of like questions that have been asked, and there's like some cue card Y Combinator preparation. And really the goal is to, answer those questions succinctly. One of the things that we've got feedback on is just you hear me talking here all the time. It's like generally try to answer questions succinctly and as quickly as possible so that you can get through a number of questions instead of, going too deep into depth into a specific question and then not getting to navigate through to other important parts of the business. And I think I'll ask, why. Question would be like, why did you not get accepted into Y Combinator? I think a very templated canned response came from Michael through email, but I still think it was a nice one, which was, I actually like you personally as founders. We think you have made a ton of progress and you're doing something super, you two individuals, myself and Vatzel, seem really hardworking and ambitious and valuable. We are struggling with the business model and the product because you're maybe not as reined in on a specific customer segment, and we continue to define that, but still I think with the application of speech recognition and natural language processing that that can create complexity, and you start to get inbound inquiries from different kinds of customers. So I think one of my recommendations would be really clearly define who your customer is and have a very simple stated reason for why you are why you're doing what you're doing, what the mission is, and what you actually do. Where does the value be created? Because we got lost, I think, in the complexity of that in several different use cases from the customers that we had at the time, which then created risk, created complexity, and the story that they're then weaving in their head became less clear. I think overall, good experience with that interview. We did a decent job, but not good enough, obviously. And then the recommendation is just to continue to apply at that standpoint. So I'm not going to go too deep into the structure of sort of YC. I think there are, lots of resources on that, and I'm not an expert in that because first I haven't done YC. But what I just wanted to sort of talk about was the actual sort of application itself, and just highlight and amplify that if you are interested in this deadline is coming. And there's one other note that I want to talk about, and I'll jump on in a sec. A couple other things, all will be links in resources here, but they're investing 500, now a new deal has sort of emerged, $500K. You don't have to take that. You've got a 125, and then there's a 375 on an uncapped safe, meaning you can really, depending on what that next investment is, that can put you in a pretty good spot. And they're sort of continuing to buy their sort of equity in the business as you grow and raise more money and get more investment and continue to hit, hopefully your traction and ideal milestones and everything there. Now, the other part that I wanted to touch on that I thought was super interesting is I had actually shared some videos on this in the past, which was, first of all, Y Combinator reduces the cohort size to 40% due to economic downturn. And I shared a whole video about this. I'll link this in the profile, just 10 minutes. But I have some resources around there as well too, and starting to get some comments and really nice engagement from people in that regards. And I think it's a super interesting time because even in this Instagram post, what you can see is they're reviewing 20,000 startups. So put that in your mind, is that's a lot of companies. How do they filter out very quickly which ones are good, which ones are not? And I think there is a lot of qualitative analysis that can be done, but not at a huge level of scale like that. And then you've got the quantitative analysis of metrics and revenue and things like that. And especially in a time of downturn, what those things are probably being used to filter and focus down on companies and continue to grow. So Stephanie's here, YC's head of admissions. She's reviewing 20,000 startups for the next cohort, even in the middle of a downturn. And then here's what she's looking for. So there are a couple of sort of example companies that then they're sort of using as sort of examples for how you can then do a solid application. This one, it looks like 5 million bookings. So there's a metric of adoption and usage and growth. So making sure you can highlight that there is tractions. And then this one looks like maybe possibly a little bit more of a moonshot. and moonshots are good. I think that was one of the other reasons why our application, or sort of our interview, sort of struggled, is come from a little bit more of a conservative, risk-averse background where I don't have access to a bunch of investors, and generally I come from sort of this agency service background. It's like, if you don't have enough money, guess what? You can't really have a business, and so that's sometimes deviates from the norm, especially when we interviewed, which was this frothy market where you are. Like, the expectation is you just continually raise money and you don't have to worry about profitability in the short term, because you're optimizing for hyper growth and then trying to achieve profitability later. So here's a couple other sort of examples, not exactly to share exactly all the points of it, but just a couple sort of examples here. I'll link this post, and just anything in general. YC is constantly sort of putting out content. They've always done a really good job at that, and you can learn a lot just from following that. I've also linked somewhere Hacker News, which you can see, not only can you see content that's being posted on there. This is ran by Y Combinator, sort of separately, but still very involved. You can also contribute and be part of it. And I believe there is some belief in love for people who are contributing on Hacker News. So that's another thing to look at. You've also got the Twitter here. And then the other thing that I thought was sort of funny is, this was their warning letters to founders, their role in startup correction and advice. So this was a little bit of my commentary beyond just the actual note itself, but included a link about that. And so with this in mind, that should have some impact, I think, on your application. You can see here, I had opened it up just so I could show you what you're actually then dealing with. You've got basically a bunch of fields. My recommendation is put this in a Google Doc and do these answers, then paste them in as you sort of finalize the answers, get some feedback, get some people to take a look at it, especially on your team, maybe some outside perspective if you have it, and maybe even some people who have YC experience who have successfully gone through. The other piece, so again, a couple things. Obviously, you should have a website. Just if you're not, then you're in a tough spot, to be honest. Demo. And then you've got personal information. A lot of questions, remain consistent, although there are some slight variations, I think, between sort of application and application, maybe just depending on the market, or they're figuring, hey, if I knew this answer compared to this answer, I would actually have a little bit better of an insight into the company overall, and it would be, easier to make these decisions. So I think they, make a couple changes. Like, for example, have you received any government grants? That was not a question that I had seen in the past. That's a new question I'm seeing right now, but there are a couple very consistent ones. Who writes code? Where does the technical work? Very product, very technology focused, and something that you should consider as you move forward. And of course, there's deviations from any rule, but those are a couple things that I'm I've seen pretty consistently based on the companies that actually get into YC, and then my own experience sort of applying, and then just talking to people who have again gone through it or similar programs with sort of the same thesis around here. So the other thing is there's I can't exactly get to this for some reason right now, but there's also a founder profile that you need to fill out. And then if you have other founders on the team, you've got to make sure that you link those, have a nice bio. I believe maybe some links to LinkedIn and everything there. You should be taking care of that stuff if you are interested in this journey anyways. And then you've got some really good answers. I think if you don't have these answers off the top of your head, writing them out consistently and succinct is a clarifying exercise and a valuable exercise anyways. I don't have advice on whether you should be writing in sentences or bullet points, but generally, if you can hit high-level valuable metrics, milestones, progress, and that is in a bulleted point list that allows for easy scanning, and the numbers and the percentages and the revenue sticks out, it seems that would be an easier read. But then additionally, there are sort of fundamental questions of, do you have revenue? And if so, then you're plugging this in, and this is where I believe a little bit more quantitative analysis would come into the actual application itself. So, ton of other things that you can go in and take a look. Obviously, competitive analysis is a big one, and I think that was a bigger, higher level, more top level feedback for us as we went through the interview process was like, hey, again, we like you, but this is a really competitive market, possibly saturated market. We've actually invested in companies who are in this market already, so we have some, understanding of it on a deeper level than what we were seeing from other sort of investors that we were talking to at the time. And we think that this is going to be a really tough time. We like you, but we're not sure you're the team that's going to be able to pull that off. You've shown some proof that it is, but the feeling that I got is that we were, a little bit of outsiders from maybe the Silicon Valley, not necessarily, from a FANG or a big company, not located geographically in the same area, and no history of other sort of fundraising besides some non-dilutive capital for other businesses that I've done. So those were a couple other things that I considered. If you are, maybe not the Stanford, MIT graduate with experience at Meta or whatever, then you are relatively possibly at a slight disadvantage, although it seems that Y Combinator is somewhat democratized in the way that they invest, and they're continuing to try to diversify their investments, although some people would still critique the lack of diversity in that. But I think overall there's a lot of great information that's come out recently about, from whether it is the letter to founders, whether it's sort of some articles about how their cohort has decreased from, I think, 414 companies to only 250 companies in the 22 summer cohort, which was down 40%. So it's still huge. They used to, struggle with only 30, but you got to think if there's 20,000 going, applying over 20,000, as they say, and then you are, they're weaning that down to say 250 if they keep it consistent. That's a small percentage. Let's see if I can pull this up on the spot of what that is. 250 of 20,000. Math, 1.25%. So 1.25% acceptance rate. So you have to differentiate. You have to be above the median and the norm, the mean, all those things, and really make sure that you stick out and differentiate, or you fit a theme or a trend or something that is valuable within the eyes of Y Combinator. And of course, considering the sort of market downturn we're in, they may even be less risk averse. They may need to be more diligent with the capital that they're spending, although they've had some incredible exits in the last few years. There are people who are giving them money to invest may have different priorities now, and that may affect how you write this application. I would again focus, you can see it right on their website. It's constantly been everywhere, and Y Combinator makes something people want. So show that this is something that people want, show that it's something that people need, and show that you've worked on it already, you make the investments, you have progress. If you don't, you better have a pretty wild, awesome, incredible idea that can truly change the world and impact a lot of people, and some sort of credibility that you are the right ones to do it. So I've already been going on for 17 minutes. That's too long. But I hope you got some insights in this. I hope I covered a couple things. The train is coming, and this is my send-off here. I appreciate you checking this out. I love doing the videos on Y Combinator. I'm glad to see some traction and some comments and engagement on it. If you like this stuff, I'll continue to publish it. I'm going to be, I think, even maybe examining some of the companies that come through the cohorts to see if I can identify anything there and give some insights along the way. And I appreciate anyone who watches these videos, who follows the stuff that we're doing here personally. Speak at Tyler, Bryden, and then through the company software at speak.co. I'll link that. Also link my website as always. And appreciate you checking this out very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.